Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week we're going to continue what we started last week, and that's a discussion of Pioneer Elite models from the 1980s. All right, well, let's talk more about the Pioneer Elite models that started in the 80s. Now, if you missed last week's video, Pioneer Elite started, I think, around 1986, and these are a pretty big departure of what most of us think about when we think about the 80s, because if you ask most collectors, if you say 1980s, or many people that are interested in vintage audio, we have a term called BPC, which is black plastic crap. And there was a lot of that produced, especially in the early part of the 80s, as manufacturers were really looking to reduce costs out of the very heavily built 70s models that really incurred a lot of expense. And so there was a sort of a race to see who could, I guess, cut costs faster. So there was a lot of that out there. But the Pioneer Elite, although it has the black front, quite a different beast compared to that sort of model. Now they have an extremely polished mirror-like finish on them. They're black, but when you get up close, you see a reflection and everything. So it's kind of hard to get up close, but certainly not BPC for sure. Now for one, these have a little bit of a trim that sort of, I guess, suggests on what's on the inside. And this is a copper plating that extends throughout the chassis for not all pieces, but many of the early pieces. And I'll show you the internals of the CD player that I showed last week so you get a general idea. But very, very well built. Quite a step up from what we, all considered standard stuff of the day. But very cool. These, I think it's in Europe, and I'll say this incorrectly, but Urishi or Ureshi, I think is what they were called, which I believe means mirror finish. And they all had that sort of design, at least in the early models. So this particular set, this is the C91 preamp and the M91 amplifier. And these came out in 1989 and ran through, I think the preamp ran through around 94. The amplifier looked like it continued on for a little longer, around 96 or so. But typical of the 80s, it has the little bar graphs for meters, and very cool. But I think it's a very distinguished look. For me, the amp very much stands out. It reminds me a little bit of early Lincoln Town Car kind of look, if you're familiar with some of the early interiors. But it reminds me a little bit of that, and just set itself apart from the standard fare. Now, when you pick this amp up, believe me, you feel it. It's not a very lightly built amp whatsoever. It does have quite a bit of heft to it. Feels well built. So something that you will certainly recognize when you go to lift it. So this was the standard fare. Now this line came out. Remember, this is late 1989, and this is on the cusp of surround sound, and this is the very early days. So the preamp incorporates several video inputs, 3 VCRs, I believe it has. So it's not surround sound at this time, but it's allowing you to bring TV sound into your stereo. So it's a throughput here. I think it has S video inputs, was the best input available at the day, and then standard, the yellow video input on the back. So very low quality, but that was what was available at this time frame. So very early on, before real surround sound started. But because of these inputs and because of the audio inputs, it has probably the most available inputs of any preamp you'll find for that reason. But it harkens back a little bit to the 70s. It had some, I guess we'll say, simulated wood panels on the side, to give it that little bit of extra, higher end look, if you will. So So that's what these are, and I'll show you some, like I always do, some up-close shots and some rear shots here so you can get a better idea. Again, the fronts are mirrored, so it's very hard to see them clearly, but I did the best I could. So hope you enjoy that. And then we'll come back after that and take a look at all of the options and the features. All right, well, I hope I did them justice. As I mentioned, it was kind of hard to get up close and come at angles and try to keep myself out of it, but I couldn't do that in every shot. But if you were able to get a good sense of it, they do have a distinctive look to them, which I think is pretty classy. I think they did set themselves apart a good bit. Now, I'll say the Sony ES line does remind me of them a little bit. You know, they're still very 80s. The style still comes through, but I think they had some aspects of them that set them apart. So pretty cool. Okay, well, let's talk about the specs as far as features, and we'll go through like I normally do, and we'll tally up and see how do they score against other units, other systems that I have rated before. So let's go through the basics. So this is the C91 preamp and the M91 amplifier. I put 89, manufactured from 89 to 94, which is the last year of the preamp, but just know the M1 does go a little further. not really that important, but I do like to point it out. MSRP, so they both retailed for $1,400 each. So usually the preamp is a little bit less, but in this case, it was the same. I assume some of the cost, also the additional connections for video, has a, as you saw in the pictures in the video, lots of connections. So I guess they just cost more than on average preamps from the 70s that didn't have to incorporate so many connections to them. Now they're incorporating audio and video. So I'm making some assumptions there, but just know that the MSRP was $1,400. So as a set, at MSRP anyway, if you paid full price, it was $2,800. So let's see, moving on into features. So it is a 200 watt per channel amp. So it doesn't have a 4 ohm, I didn't see a 4 ohm spec as far as how many, what the output was, but it does accommodate 4 ohms. There's a switch, which you saw in the pictures, and I'll show here again on the back to switch it into a mode to handle 4 and 6 ohm speakers. So you can, for one set of speakers, by the way. And so it will accommodate 4 ohm speakers if you have a set of those. So it gets an additional 30 points for that. Moving on into phonos. All these connections, but it only has one phono. So, although that's quite fine for most people, but just kind of interesting with so many connections. It was the era more so of the CD, right? And the laser disc was coming in. So there were so many other sources that have come along by then that, having phono on it was good enough, I guess. But although it's one, they do accommodate MC cartridges, and it does have some tweaking so you can accommodate different types of cartridges. So that's very nice. So it gets an additional points for that as well. Moving on, auxiliary and tape inputs. So if you count the video inputs as well, I counted 9 additional sources that, if you could figure out how to attach 9 of them and have all those cords going, you could certainly attach lots of things. So 9 additional inputs. Has a balance control, has the volume mute, which is nice. Didn't see a loudness switch though. That was kind of interesting. It does have tone defeat control. It has bass, treble control, has high-low filters, which is a very nice feature to have. Power meters, of course, and it is separate, so it does have pre-out amp in separate connectivity there. And then AC switching has 2 switched, 1 unswitched. And then speaker sets, it does accommodate 2 sets of speakers. So being separate, it's not too much of a surprise. Because it has so many connections, it does bump it right up to the very top of the highest scores I've had, which was the separates for Sansui. Sansui had, it was the 2101, I believe. I featured some months ago, and it scored the same score, which is 310 points. It was a little different. The Sansui had a few less inputs and had some other features, but they came out the same. So, if you're looking for a system that can accommodate lots of inputs, this is it. Or if you like something that will accommodate MC cartridges, this will do that as well. And it's actually one reason I have a C90 that I use in my reference system. So, and part of that is because it can handle MC cartridges. I just like that feature. The other thing that this has, of course, is a remote. I don't have remotes for most of my gear because it's usually older than this, but this is the era of remotes, so that's a nice feature as well. I don't get points for that though, because that would give it a little bit of a head start against older units, so don't count that for extra, but it is a very nice feature. So that's it. Just another review of a couple of more components from the Elite line. I have some others. I've got this cassette deck. I've got the laser disc. I need to find a laser disc and see if I can give it a test run. That would be fun to do. And some other units, but I think the next thing as far as the Elite line will be the speakers. I've got 2 sets of them, and so I'm going to probably put those into play. If not the next video, then maybe the one after that. But something cool about that, because I have an acrylic unit that was made just like the HPM 100s, they made acrylic units for the TZ9. So kind of cool. It's in rough shape, but still want to show it to you anyway. So that is it for this week. Hope you enjoyed that. If you don't want to miss the next video, hit subscribe. Give us a thumbs up while you're there. And hit that notification bell too to make sure you're notified. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in.